number of experts are now questioning the evidence used against her.
Personally, I don't think she had a fair trial, but it is possible that an innocent woman has gone to jail.
Judith Moritz and Jonathan Coffey. Welcome. There's so much involved in this story, in this case. It is a story, a court trial that shocked everybody, particularly a young nurse looking after babies. Why do you think, Judith, there are these growing number of experts who are now questioning the prosecution evidence, and some even calling for a retrial and saying this is a miscarriage of justice? Has an innocent woman gone to jail?
Because it was a case built on circumstantial evidence. Nobody saw her do anything. There wasn't forensic evidence, there wasn't CCTV, there wasn't DNA, those sorts of things that would have made this an open and shut case maybe for a lot of people. It was built, I say in the book, it was built like a careful pack of cards for the prosecution. It was built like a careful pack of cards for the prosecution. There were loads of strands of individual pieces of evidence which they put together to make the picture, and it took months and months, and at the end of it, there were still questions left unanswered. Lots of them, we'll get into it maybe. She was found guilty, but why would somebody do this? What was the motive? What's the psychology? All of that was not addressed by the case.
You sat in that courtroom, one of the very few journalists allowed through the whole trial.
Yeah.
So you sat and you looked at this young woman. What did you make of her at that time? Did you ever change your mind during the trial, listening to the evidence, looking at her? And how do you feel now? Do you think that she should have gone to jail and that she is guilty?
So did I change my mind? I went into that courtroom and there were only 4 of us who were there as reporters regularly through in the actual room itself. And being in the room was really important because I was as far away from her, pretty much, as I am now from you and from Kelly. We were really nearby, but she was behind glass in the dock, and we had months and months of her not saying anything, just sitting there while this case is swirling around her, and she was completely impassive. She barely moved. She showed very little emotion. And I started thinking, that the evidence we were listening to was so harrowing about these babies, week after week of really difficult detail, and she showed no emotion. And I thought, is she going to go into the witness box? Is she going to give an account of herself? Because we didn't know that. That was so fascinating when she went into that witness box. 14 days she was there, over the course of a month. It wasn't consecutive days, but that, I think, was the best opportunity any of us had to try to get a sense of her. She tied herself in knots. She struggled when she was cross-examined. She agreed with things, then she disagreed with things she'd previously agreed. I found that was a central part of my assessment. And a lot that's missing, I think, from a lot of this commentary that we're seeing at the moment. I understand why those questions are being asked. I get it. But, I think what we're not discussing is what the jury took into that jury room. There's a sense that we're judging the jury at the moment. And they absolutely will have accounted for that period of time in the witness box, along with everything else.
Jonathan, sorry, go ahead.
Jonathan, you have conflicting emotions over the whole thing, isn't it? I noticed in the documentary you kept going, I'm still not sure.
Yeah, I said in the documentary I change my mind on this case every week, which is sort of a shorthand way of saying this case has driven me, a little crazy in a way, because, I have changed my mind on it. It has been a really vexing, evidentially torturous case. And as Judith said, no one saw her do this stuff. And there's nothing obvious in her background that points to her being a killer. So we are really in the realm of prosecution expert evidence. And that is what is being contested now. I mean, I am a natural skeptic. I'm a natural doubter. And I must say, in the course of writing this book, we have, I think, gathered information that makes it more difficult for natural skeptics. And I do think that the case for Lucy Letby's innocence is actually a pretty difficult one to make.
And yet, you know, there's so many witnesses coming forward now, expert witnesses. I mean, obviously, first of all, I think we just have to say that this must be the most difficult experience you can possibly imagine for the families involved, because they think it's all set in stone, the story's been told, then there's a retrial, now there's talk of a retrial, which is what I think... Oh, no, David Davis, the MP, is calling for a full-on start from scratch again. I mean, that must be torturous for them. But it feels, to some extent, that this is one of those cases that revolves around the personality of the person accused. And I wonder if that's part of the kind of mystery of it to everyone. And the reason people find it so compelling, including yourselves, is the fact that she's enigmatic. If she was more sympathetic, perhaps, then perhaps it would have gone a different way, because, as you say, the evidence is circumstantial.
Yeah, I mean, she is almost a sort of a blank slate. You know, she doesn't sort of give anything away one way or the other, almost. I mean, her background is almost spotless. You know, we've heard the stories of serial killers who, when the police go into their homes, they find horrific things and they find all the signs of a budding killer. They didn't find much of that when they went into Lucy Letby's home, with the exception of some notes that look very much like confession notes.
And medical notes under the... They found medical notes relating to the babies and other babies as well. And that's part of what... That's what I'm saying. It's a big picture here. There's all sorts.
On that basis, what fascinated me is that the one expert, Dr. Michael Hall, who actually had medical evidence and an opinion that supported her case, he wasn't heard. Why wasn't he heard at trial?
I mean, that's one of the big puzzles, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's impossible for anyone to say with certainty what's gone on here behind the scenes, because we'll never find out, for legal reasons, we'll never find out what went on within that defence team discussion. But they didn't call their expert witness. And so the only person who gave evidence in Lucy Letby's own defence was herself and the hospital plumber, who was there to talk about drainage issues.
That doesn't make sense, though.
And that's one of the issues right now. I think that's why people feel that they can come back
Is there a concern, though, Jonathan, that this is turning into a little bit of a soap opera, because you have armchair detectives, people... Your book, I'm not saying your book is that, but, you know, that everyone's got an opinion where you have to rely on the justice system, the court process, the jury.
Well, I mean, we maybe have different things to say on that. I mean, being a natural sceptic, you know, I don't have blind faith in the system. I think it's OK to question the system if those questions are reasonable. And I think if people are asking reasonable questions, it's our duty to examine them and just be rigorously objective and evidence-led.
I must just read, Lucy Letby has a new defence barrister who featured in your documentary, Mark MacDonald. He said, "It must be remembered there was no forensic evidence and no evidence that Lucy was seen to do anything wrong to any child. The evidence is incredibly tenuous and amounts in some cases to simply guesswork." So, yet another opinion. But listen, thank you so much. We're not going to unravel this here at all. Judith Moritz and Jonathan Coffey.